Major de Coverley from Catch-22, mental maturity does not arise from the youth culture. How do you create... So I think there's either a typo here or a word missing, so I'm not sure exactly. How do you create now Asimov's foundation to create a society focusing on growing mature, thinking humans? And I don't remember this vague glimmering of Asimov's foundation, but I can't quite remember exactly what it is. But I think we can interpret the question without that. Even, how that scene, the getting rid of the great loyalty, the glorious loyalty oath crusade. Was done in Heller's imagining with a respected elder coming in and saying no, first not for me, and then obviously not for anyone else either. So how? I guess there's two possible questions here. What do we do absent those? Like, who do we look to absent that kind of person now? And also, how do we make more of them? How do we make those people?
Well, this will be uncontroversial for you, me, and most of our audience. But one thing is you have to stop demonizing masculinity.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that the people who wield this stuff have to be men, right? But the point is, those are characteristics that have traditionally been seen in men. They have been seen in extraordinary women who have very often found their names inscribed in history because of it. But the point is, those characteristics that cause you not to obsess over every little slight and to regard being tough and getting stuff done and, stoicism and all of that, right? Those characteristics need to be resurrected, and being told that they are toxic is itself toxic, right? It is dangerous to society to tell people that, bucking up and getting the job done is no longer on the menu, because what we need to do is, all come into work and immediately cry on each other's shoulders. No, right? That just doesn't work. And so how you do that in this era, where to even voice that runs the risk of, you being portrayed as
callous, worse,
toxic,
right?
That's that's the thing we have to get around, is you've got to cultivate that stuff in yourself, right? You got to toughen yourself up, and you got to not be shy about talking to your kids and others about the fact that these are actually not only desirable characteristics, but it is necessary. Not everybody has to have them, but you need tough people.
Yeah. And to those adults who do oversee large swaths of employees, for instance, like, all parents should be inculcating this in their children, regardless of the sex of their children. But if you are an employer who has, runs Spotify, and the employees are threatening to walk out if they don't start censoring some of Joe Rogan's podcasts, or J.K. Rowling's publisher, whose employees are threatening to walk out if they don't censor her, or Google, whose employees won with the James Damore memo, which didn't say what a lot of people thought it said, and which did say a lot of very true things. And not only did the employees manage to make a coup happen, but what was less well reported was afterwards a bunch of them took sick days because they were too emotional to come to work. Now, come on. Why would you let the people who are too emotional to work drive policy? Don't let people who are too emotional to work drive policy. That's not sane.
Right.
That's not sane.
And we saw actually one of the few examples of the proper response to this by the head of Coinbase.
Oh, I don't think I know the story.
Week. So this is a CEO who put out a thing that says, look, we care about injustice, but that's not what Coinbase is. Coinbase is about something, and we are not going to be able to accomplish it if what we are doing is coming to work for the purposes of therapy. And so his point was, look, leave that stuff at home, right? And he's taken a tremendous amount of crap for it.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But here's the thing. Can anybody really doubt that in a world, the woke will try to stamp that example out, because in order for them not to lose, there have to be no examples of companies that do that. Otherwise, what you will get is the hegemony of those who have resisted we've been saying this from the beginning. If you've got engineering schools that are woke and other engineering schools that aren't woke, then ultimately the ones that aren't woke will be in charge of everything because they will make better bridges and buildings and all of that other stuff. And so
their stuff is less likely to fail.
Right. And so the point is, get out of yourself long enough to recognize that whatever thing you're trying to fix with your hard coding of your morality, you're making it fragile with respect to all the things it's in competition with.
Well, most of these people advocating for these things have never made anything real, and they wouldn't recognize the difference between a real thing and a socially constructed thing clearly. But based on the fact that they keep on making ludicrous claims like biological sex isn't real and math isn't real, and they clearly just have long since lost the plot.
Yeah.
And why are we listening to them? Why is anyone caving to them?
Well, unfortunately, the answer is pretty simple and pretty mundane, right? First of all, I do think, it's uncomfortable to say, but a lot of the people who are initiating this are people who intuit that they will not be well served by meritocracy. They won't be winners, right? And I don't think this is necessarily on them. I think society has served them very badly. And so the fact that they perceive that in a meritocracy they will lose, and so they are fighting meritocracy because actually that's the route for them to wellness, that's something we have to deal with. But once they have articulated that position, and once they are exerting it in a muscular fashion, then the game theory for the individual who wants to dodge the penalty is to simply embrace it, which causes it to grow and spread. So it's like those two things are sufficient to explain it.
So two things. By you invoking a muscular fashion for the woke, you caused a cognitive dissonance in my brain that I'm just having a hard time escaping from. Most of the individuals don't appear to be very muscular, it turns out.
Yes, the threat is muscular.
Yes, no, I know what you meant. Okay. I just I got the visual image, muscular phenotype. I'm like, that's not what the woke is.
No.
Are you making the claim, which is pretty audacious if you are, but I just want to see if I heard you right, that many of the people arguing against effectively Enlightenment values, which includes the idea of meritocracy, which is not to say that we think that we have a perfect meritocracy or even that it can be perfectly obtained in a democratic system, but that we can aspire to it. But are you saying that you think that those who are arguing against it are doing so in part because they would not win in a fair meritocracy, that they are somehow, they have through maybe fault of their own, maybe no fault of their own, through some combination of factors into which they were born and handed, that they would not be winning and therefore are trying to create a new kind of system?
Yes, but it's important to get all of the pieces of that and then to add one. So the pieces are
all the pieces that I just laid out, or no?
Yes.
Okay.
What I don't want to be lost is, everybody who's over in that left cabal is a loser. My point is, those who would argue against meritocracy itself, I believe, have intuited that it would not serve them, and therefore they have very little to lose in challenging the idea that it could even work, right? But the other part I want to make sure is heard by people is, to the extent that you have large numbers of people who cannot compete in a meritocracy, that is not necessarily their fault. In fact, it largely is unlikely to be their fault. It's the result of a system that decided to drug them for profit, decided to miseducate them so as to create cogs to operate machines that don't even exist anymore. So
babysat them with screens,
fed them porn, whatever it did, it created people who are not well constructed to do shit. And,
gave them junk everything.
It gave them junk everything.
Junk sex, junk media, junk everything.
And so their rebellion is to be expected. But that does not mean that we need to humor the idea that the Enlightenment was always and only a tool of oppression, that meritocracy is itself a trick. Those things are garbage and nonsense. And the answer should be, the quicker we get to a meritocracy that where you are incentivized to succeed and given the tools with which to do it, the better, right?
Yep.
That's the thing. We want a fair meritocracy. Well, that's synonymous, but that's the objective.